Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio lunchtime talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and online. So whether you're in Bristol or far away, you're very welcome. My name is Tim. I'm studio coordinator. I am a early 30s black male wearing black glasses and a black hoodie with bad hair. I'm going to say a little bit more about the PM studio and then introduce today's speaker. So welcome. If you don't know, is there anyone who's new to the studio here today?
Oh, welcome.
Hey, welcome. If you don't know much about Pervasive Media Studio, then we offer these lunchtime talks and they're part of the Open Studio Friday offer. Every Friday, the Pervasive Media Studio throws open our doors and offers you the chance to spend time in the space. And you can hot desk here from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. every Friday. It is great. Yeah, I'm contractually obliged to say that. So, quick bit of housekeeping. Feel free to move around, make a cup of tea, grab a glass of water. Kitchen's just back there. We've got a quiet space just to the left of the space. So if you need to take a break, just jump in there. Fire exit at either end of the studio, at the back left and around the corner by the social space as well. We're not planning a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, presumably that's real. So I'll put on my pink jacket and escort you out. Accessible toilets and baby change can be found in the corridor just back there. And a captioned version of the talk will be available after this talk's finished. So this talk is by Gill Wildman. And Gill's worked with creative people and social entrepreneurs in the UK and across the world. Her grounding is in community development, strategic design and innovation. And today she'll be talking about the purpose, principles and practice of working with creative people, their money-making activities and how we can work around precarity and making a livelihood. So, when you're ready.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, I'm Gill Wildman. I'll know some of you from the studio and some of you are new to me, and it's really great to get a chance to do this. These talks are always about work in progress, so what you're seeing is like a midpoint in some work that I've been doing over the last few years, which Watershed and Pervasive Media Studio have been a really generous host for me doing some of that work. So yeah, you're going to see a bunch of thoughts. I'm starting here with a photo that I took in the Welsh Council buildings, which I thought was really, really brilliant because part of the way I feel, the way I relate to people that are creating social and creative businesses is that you're inspiring us on so many levels. And I also start as a creative person. I've been, years ago, I trained as a graphic designer and then became a strategic designer because I went into looking at innovation studies and then became a consultant around new product development for different kinds of technology companies, including Microsoft and Samsung and the BBC and a whole bunch of other folk. And then kind of, well, I'll tell you more about it, but one of the problems I found and where the title comes from is that I always thought, running a business as a creative person was just about doing the work. But turns out that it's not. There's a little bit more to it. That it also involves getting the work in the first place. And all of that work that it takes for people to know what you do, to trust that you'll do it, all of the professional practice around, presenting yourself as someone who can do this stuff, manage this work, deliver it on time, all of that stuff. And then, hey, the last bit is getting paid for the work. I didn't realise that there were 3 components to running my creative business until I realised that I was absolutely worn out because of all of this stuff. And it wasn't just about me turning up and being dazzling. It was about me having to get onto the accounts department again and again. Please, can you pay this bill? And let me say, that still happens to me now. I'm not a baby designer anymore. I'm someone who's very experienced in my practice, and I still have to go through a bunch of hoops with people to get paid. So I say that only in a kind of a reassuring way that it happens to all of us, but also not in a reassuring way in that it shouldn't, but it does. So this little talk is going to be about purpose, principles and practice, about the work I've been doing with creative business people and the way that they do what they do. It's going to have a couple of myth-busting moments, so buckle up, because they may be things that may change your perspective. And then right in the middle, you'll have to spot it. I'm going to have a commercial break. So for me, this stuff started when I was working at the Design Council, and we got to do a really interesting project that wasn't about just saying how hand-wavy things, saying how good design was, but we actually got stuck in with companies, and we did some work. This is with a nanomaterials emerging technology startup back in 2004. And we were showing them design techniques of how you could explain what the company is thinking about as a piece of wall. Well, you might call it like a war room kind of thing. That's an unfortunate analogy, but it's where you put the ideas and the thinking on the wall, and they'd never done that before. And for them, it was really exciting because they were using design techniques, so creative techniques that we use in business planning and business communication. And they took their board past this thinking. It's a couple of post-it notes and some drawing, but we tidied it up, we made it presentable. And they could then, their board could see the strategy of the company in terms of new products they were designing and delivering for a nanomaterials company. That really inspired me about how we could use the stuff that I know as a designer and as a strategic designer in different contexts. So my fascination with how does business work, and then how do I share that stuff with other people, has been informed by that early experience. And so those are like the two hinges for me, is like, how does a business work? What are the components of it? And how do I get to share that with people really, really fast so that they feel more in control? So back in 2016, I started this company that I'm in, which is called Upstarter. And the idea was that we could take all of that, the way we'd applied design in that project, through into formats that we could actually bring to people that are starting new businesses. And specialising with businesses at the early stage, because as you're later on in your business, you kind of got stuck in your ways a little bit. You like to do things a certain way, and you're maybe not as flexible. Whereas when you're just starting, everything's up for grabs. So that's where it started, was very, very early stage, creative and social micro businesses. And I don't think I've got to the truly enlightened support service and network of infrastructure around micro businesses, but I'm certainly in the right place because I've been working with PM Studio, with Bristol and Bath Creative R&D, with Black Southwest Network, with Cluster, with a whole bunch of other people that are trying to do this. And back when I started doing this, there was almost nothing. There was a few bits and pieces, there was some programs, but now, over the last few years, there's been lots, and you'll see that there is even more. And what's interesting about creative businesses, I've just been doing some research around freelancing, and the thing about creative businesses is that we appeal a certain size, but often we're made up of lots of very smaller parts. So it's a bit like, it's a bit like a shoal. Where you've got lots of parts, but it appears like a whole thing. So there's a really interesting interaction for me between those two things, the parts and the whole. And how many of you are freelancers or would consider yourself freelancers? Right. And sometimes you get packaged up in a project and you're part of the project team, or you might be within a company, being their constant supplier of a certain type of thing. Well, what's interesting is there's lots of this, particularly in the creative industries. But there's also challenges for freelancers too, because as this says, drive for systemic change needs to continue forward because it's harder for freelancers as well. Because not only do you do what you do in terms of those three, getting the work in, doing the work and getting paid for the work, but you're also your own IT department, your own HR department, you are your own well-being boss. All of those things that you might need to do, you're doing yourself. And we'll come back to that as well. So people are talking increasingly about this, about how we need new models of supporting creative businesses and also particularly freelancers. But one of the things one of the challenges with freelancing, well, and also creative businesses right across the board, is that you don't need so much money, and freelancers can be seen as a source of free labour. But different things are happening. So one of the interesting things the Welsh Government is doing is a freelancer pledge to be able to support people in a different kind of way. And we'll find more of that. One of the things that we do, though, as right across the board as creative practitioners, is that we create value. And that happens on different levels. Yes, it may happen on a financial level, that might design a beautiful chair that maybe sells an awful lot. Look how many has been bought for this building. But then we'll also produce social value in terms of different things that that it might offer to people. So, for example, that kind of chair may enable better conversations because it's designed for people to sit next to each other. In performances that we do, we may make connections and conversations that people haven't had before. And then there's also that cultural value, and there's tons of writing around this, about what it does when we produce culture and when people get to share culture with each other. Reference points, we were just talking about Roots, the band Roots earlier. The fact that we've got that connection, we can talk about that as a reference point, that we could share music, the music that started the event here. All of those things produce something in us, something that's shared, something that's much less tangible than money, but no less important. And that stuff's being researched and evaluated as well. But then we also connect to other things. So every creative practitioner is also connecting to people before or after them. So it may be who supplies the software that you use to make what you do. They then get the benefit of you purchasing their software. Who gets to use what you make afterwards? Or who puts what you make into what they make? And we start to sort of see this stuff as not only a shoal of individuals, but interconnected parts of a system. And that's the stuff that really fascinates me, is how we're not just people making lots of tiny little businesses on our own, but the power of what it means when we're actually acting together. And I'll come back to that. Let's talk money. So, Squid Game, for example, if you think about all the components that goes into making a series like Squid Game, the makeup, the costumes, the script writing, the runners, the gaffers, all of the people that are involved in that, and I don't know because I'm not even in the TV industry. So there's a ton of people contributing to that thing. And then it ends up being worth $900 million to Netflix. So you can't say for 1 second that creative people are not producing serious financial value. We haven't even started talking about what Squid Game means in a cultural setting or what it means socially either. We've now got the reference point for a really hideous game now that we didn't have before, and what that means to us culturally to have that kind of reference. But when I talk about business, a lot of creative people haven't been to business school. I haven't been to business school. I've been to, I've been to Harvard, but I went there to do some work. I haven't been there to actually study. So our notions of what business is and what business capabilities are often sort of wrapped up in these kinds of things that, well, I didn't go to business school, I don't know anything about business. And if I had, obviously, £1 for every time someone had said, I don't know anything about business, I would be really rich. And we would be sitting somewhere really glamorous and having an amazing lunch. And the problem with also business thinking is what it does to people. So I often find with creative folks is it feels like there's clear blue water between that kind of real hyper-capitalist model and what everyone else is doing. And it's not, it's just so prevalent. I don't see many There's obviously a handful of creative folk that do want to make a lot of money, and they're going for it. They're already doing it, so we don't even need to worry about that. But one of the things that does concern us is what happens to you when you become rich and successful, if that is the case. But also that financial success doesn't mean, changes you, turns you into something awful. And here's some evidence about what it does to people on Wall Street from Dasha Keltner, fantastic research from a while ago. So these are our fears often, that we're going to be distorted by success, or we're going to be distorted by money or the world of business. Whereas it could actually mean something much richer. So here's a fantastic place in south of France called Sète, which has a range of festivals in the summer. And here he's celebrating with like an overview of its festivals, about what it can bring to this small fishing town in the south of France, including Worldwide Festival, which is rather good. So it's seeing how the kind of business of creative businesses can actually sustain and support a thriving economy in a place starts to feel to me a little bit more like that's what it's for, that it's not about its own self, but is also about a network of businesses that collaborate and combine, in a summer of festivals. One of the things that happened during lockdown, and now this is a story, I don't have any evidence about it, but one of the problems with lockdown was that a lot of the people that used to work on festivals, not having any work because of lockdown, not being able to do anything physical in front of people, then went to work for Netflix or some other company that were obviously looking for people to work for them. And so that festival industry lost that workforce, because naturally people are going to go to where they can make a living, and that's what they're going to do. So my interest is in how do we keep people together? How do we help people? How does my company and the activities that I get to do help people create a living and stay independent, stay focused, stay interconnected? Things like Sea Monster knew the kinds of work that people do that help us completely reconceive the beach at Weston. It changes how we see a place. It changes how we think about using materials. One of the absolute treasures that creative business does is to actually bring whole new ways of seeing things. There's creative folk that also are so clear about their values, such as Nathan and his amazing buff bar, which if you want your nails done is absolutely brilliant, but takes the values into the business practice. So one of the things Nathan does is check whether the collaborators he's got actually do connect with him on a values level, not just on a business level. Okay, myth number one, you ready? Creative people do not want to buy homes or have security or pensions. What do you think?
They'd quite like a home, wouldn't they?
Yeah?
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Glamorous, if nothing else, in a nice hot country.
Does anyone...
When you're 20, you're not worried about your pension, but, as time goes on, you think, oh, yeah, it's all other, it's a bit like being greatly rewarded for being ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
The normal world seems to reward people more than creative world.
Yeah.
And, so a lot of my normal friends have all got money, pensions, houses,
Absolutely.
2 houses.
Do you want to speak into this?
Thank you.
No,
Could we just get a show of hands who does not want security? Could we get a show of hands of who wants a precarious home life? Can we get a little show of hands around who does not want a pension? Great. So that myth's just not true, I think, and you say as well. Let's try another one. Creative people thrive on exposure. So there's evidence across creative industries that employees work unpaid over hours to the tune of an average of 15 hours per month. And many self-employed workers and freelancers do unpaid or favour-based work. There's a kind of an expectation and an acceptance, but it's also a wake-up call as well. Myth number 3, creative people don't need to go on holiday. You don't need it. You don't need rest and relaxation, do you?
You're doing what you love.
That one.
Why would you need a holiday? Aren't you lucky?
Fantastic. It's really essential for everyone, and increasingly one of the fantastic things that's come out of lockdown is some really, really interesting people that are bringing out the absolute importance of rest, relaxation, reflection, all of those things. And without it, our work is impoverished. And if we don't, so making that time takes a little extra cash or a little extra time to be able to do that. So I'm going to probably talk about a buffer every now and again. And the buffer is the extra after you've earned the money that you pay for. The extra is the buffer, the profit, the money that goes into you having a little bit of extra time. And the buffer allows you time to play like this. This is Alec and Camille playing around with light and live projection. And it was such a magical moment to capture them in that mode of discovery, because it's when you're doing that that you find the technique or the method or the wild things like here's squid soups, like one of their many sort of lighting displays that they've played with about putting sound and light in little devices so that you can walk through light and they can program different kinds of environments for you. This stuff only happens when you're rested, paid for, have got yourself in a discovery space. Myth number 4, creative people don't need much money to work with. Well, all I'm going to say to that is pay rates. Pay rates, what people expect to pay you, your experience of having to negotiate that. There's more than one session where I've had to say double your rates, not because people are trying to fit into well, how do I represent value for money for people when they don't know me? What should I do? And they pull back earlier. The other challenge with that is that if we all charge less, that creates a barrier for people that can't afford to do the work. And that's particularly people of minoritized and from different socioeconomic backgrounds who can't afford to work then. So there's an argument for fair rate and fair pay, which I say really in all seriousness. It's absolutely critical that we make sure that there's parity and that there's a chance for other people to survive. So if I undercut my rates, someone else suffers. Sorry.
As creatives have been around a long time, I'm not sure this is on anyway. Oh, it is. It's going to the stream. Oh, okay. Hi, stream. You know, we've gone through various decades of change, including the internet back in the late 90s, then globalization, and the fact that a lot of our creative jobs were then being done at an inferior level, I would say, at the time, because they hadn't had our cultural exposure and education and environment, but they were still producing something that people could pay very little for. And so therefore we weren't able to compete in the market. And that's just growing with AI and everything else.
My favorite.
So, you know, it's really tough, this thing of pay rates, and how does one establish something that's fair and is seen as valuable.
Thank you. Well, we do need to talk about our value. We do need to demonstrate it. We do need to continue to articulate that. Sometimes we have people that we can point to who have got further, have been able to make, you know, a splash. And so Alex Fleetwood from Sensible Object is one of the sort of stories from the studio, really. Alex was exploring this notion of these characters on this plinth from here. Oh, in fact, here's one. Here's one he made earlier, not me. But then gets bought, the whole thing becomes so developed that it gets bought by Niantic. Now, things have changed since then, but it's quite interesting that occasionally, given the right set of circumstances, support, encouragement, enough input into funding, and some structure around things, that these kinds of things can happen. And that's one of the reasons why the studio here and Watershed and lots of other organisations now have started to build programmes that support when R&D happens, so the kind of things like Playable Cities and Bristol Bath Creative R&D, when R&D happens, that also now there's a structure of business support. And that's what I've been brought in to do, which is fabulous. But the thing is, for creative industries is we could do a lot more if we had a little bit more. I mean, and one of the things is the budgets are often small or smallish, and so it makes it difficult. So hold tight, because I'm going to show you what Apple spend on R&D. So 2022, it was 26.25 billion US dollars on R&D. So that's because it's a very cash-rich business, and also that's how they do what they do. So they will prioritise this kind of thing. But I just want to get a sense of scale. Okay, I'm going to switch it off now. It's a bit hard to look at. Let's look at the lovely Seth Jackson. So the whole thing of playing around and discovery means that you can make a beer machine that you can use with your thoughts. How fantastic is that? And the whole thing about these kinds of things, and this was at the weekend, wasn't it? It was running. Whether this is what you want to be making or not is not the point. What is the point is that when you do things like this, you come across serendipitous discoveries of other kinds of applications. So you follow your nose about what you're interested in, but you discover something that can then be applied in lots of different other contexts that also could generate money for you, that might fund you to do the work you really want to do as well. So thinking about this in a little bit more of a system way might be a way of looking at where you go next. I'm going to talk about the principles briefly about how I do what I do, because I said I would. I go to wherever the creative businesses are, so that's why I'm here. That's why PM Studio has given me a home for the last couple of years. But I also go and work in other places, which is a delight. I've been able to go to Jordan and work with creatives there, in Cairo, in Sao Paulo, and it's been really fabulous to get that view across different kinds of contexts and different ways that people work. So that's, for me, going to where everyone is a really key principle, rather than making a building and getting everyone to come to me. Second thing is I think because I'm a designer, the way that I work is I prototype everything. So I've prototyped everything that we've done in our company and the way we work with people. So just like this talk is a work in progress, everything else I do is also. But that's also the approach to business making that underpins everything we do. So your business starts somewhere and it gets improved and built on over time. And I think that really works. I've seen it work, and it feels like it's a much more stable way to start a business than to try and get everything right and then do a big launch. Lots of other people in Silicon Valley also think that too, but that's my version. The other thing is to give it away as fast as possible. So as we work with people, we develop tools and methods, and then we throw them at people, give them away, put them on websites, because we're always making and improving stuff. But we made a toolkit for Southwest Creative Technology Network. we've given the tools that we've made also to Watershed team to use, and continue to do that really. We make things like this. You might see us around the studio. There's a little book about investors. To be honest, I'd do a much better version now, but at least we made something to start off. This is how investment works when you've got a creative business, and this is what you might consider. So there's these for knocking around the studio, you're welcome to have. And then we also make things like, here's a deck of cards of 50 different business models you might think about. So if you're doing a business and you can't quite work out how would it turn up, where would it land, here's a bunch of examples of real life that you might want to use, and you're welcome to have a look at these. Cheers. And the last one really for the moment is, it's all about the founder, the person that's doing it. There's a lot of business development that's very much about coming in as the guru. I know everything. I can tell you everything you should do. Ask me a question, I'll tell you which way to go. And for me, it's totally the wrong approach, because the only thing that matters is that you have the agency to decide what you're going to do. And what I'll do is I'll give you lots of support. I'll show you lots of things to help you think about what the decision, think about the decision properly, and actually get to a point where you understand the decision you're going to make. But the decision is always yours. And that's critical. That's critical. The dependency of a guru sort of mentor relationship doesn't work for me. And of course, some people do want answers. I totally understand that. And you can get it from them. There's lots of really good people out there. How are you doing? Can you do a little bit more? Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the practice then. So in all the work that I've done, I've made stuff for different settings. So the original work that was done around creative people in a project called React here. This was like the first time I was brought in to do something. This was the model that came out of like the really important things that creative businesses should be. Well, these were the behaviours of really successful creative businesses. They were doing things like lots of networking and using their networking and taking care of the relationships that they had with people. They would do work around making the business visible, whether that was social media or turning up places or just making sure that people heard and saw about them. And as someone said in an event I went to last night, if people are talking about you and you're not even there, that's even better. So, and then a form of business planning that's not about setting something in stone, but much more adaptive. So it changes over time and changes with circumstances. Then that you know your value. These were people sort of felt like, I actually know what I'm contributing on these different levels when I do the work I do. And the critical one, a deep and ongoing relationship with your audience, clients, customers, whatever you call them, but a constant dialogue so that you know that they are feeling happy, that they are, that you are listening hard enough to what they're doing. And then over time, these things get embedded and developed into, particular, this is an example of a worksheet, but also a process about thinking about your values. And one of the things I've known deeply is that with creative businesses and creative people, we don't just work from a commercial sense. We build into our work the things that really matters to us. So here's a method of thinking about and articulating your values, and then embedding them into how you do the work. So what does a value like care look like when you're talking about, for example, I don't know, how you do payments? So care might be that you pay really quickly. You don't wait 30 days, but you pay in 14, for example. And then this is the current version of those cards that are going round constantly developing and revisiting the things that we're making as well, to make sure that they're not only relevant, but also fresh enough for us to feel proud of. And of course, lots of the work that me, with groups. So over the last couple of years, we've worked with WECA. We've delivered a program for WECA. We've delivered a program for Southwest Creative Technology Network, Bristol and Bath Creative R&D. And each time we turn up, because each project is different, what we do is different. So it's always tuned to where the companies are and what they're up to and where they're trying to go in the project. Unfortunately, a lot of it looked like this for the past couple of years, and but such a delight to be able to work with people, even despite that. This is a little project for Bristol and Bath Creative R&D, which was deliberately looking, and you can't tell because it's another Zoom room, but this was deliberately looking at partnerships over long distance. It was a project called Here and There, and each UK company had paired with another company, creative company in another place, to work together. And what's really interesting about this kind of work is, yes, they produce the performances, but two of the companies in this programme devised new touring models that then goes back to the sector that they work in. So no one just does their own work. There's always this sort of additional extra benefit. And hopefully they get to, to be able to distribute that to other people. And then we got together again, which is really great. And we suddenly realised, we can actually do much deeper, much more resonant work together. And this is the ending of a programme that we did with WECA, West of England Combined Authority. Sometimes what I'm doing also is about connecting the dots, and what we noticed just before Christmas was that there was a whole bunch of funding and creative programmes that were happening, but that were just different organisations. So Digital Catapult, Bristol and Bath, Creative R&D, or there was MyWorld. So local-based funding and projects. So, and a woman who's really fantastic in bringing people together, Bryony Phillips, got everyone who's running those programmes together, and I made a map of all the funding, which we've then sent back to people that are in contact with creative businesses like Lowertim and other people around Bristol. And the idea is we'll update that, because some of that is already out of date, but that's what happens with funding. Commercial break. Are you ready? Can I introduce so this is something that's coming up, and that's why I'm going to take advantage of being able to do a little commercial break. I am with Mark Lever and a bunch of fantastic people doing a new programme that the deadline is next Friday, so it's a week away. And the idea, it's very specifically about creative growth. We've done programmes in the past for WECA, but this one is bring a creative growth project. So you might want to grow your team or your community or your income. And we'll take you through a process from May through to December. It does have very specific criteria, because these things do. The money is government money that then has to be rethought about. But Watershed and us we've devised a new programme for it. It's going to be run twice, so even if it's not right for you this year, it might be right for you next year. And it's about companies who are exploring new growth opportunities, reaching new customers, developing or taking to market a new product or service, or expanding your business to new markets, including internationally. So it's not business as usual, it's about a leap in a direction. But it's for businesses of a particular criteria, so turnover growth of 10% year on year over approximately 3 years. So you've got an idea of growth, or you're employing a minimum of 2 people over the last 2 years, full-time, part-time, or freelance, because that's how we work, created a revenue-generating product, launched a new platform or service, or reached a market of scale, and generated a sales revenue in the last 2 years. We'll have the link up later again, but if you're interested, apply by next Friday midday. Into commercial break. But I don't want to grow. Lots of people say to me, I don't want to grow. Fair enough, fair enough. It is not the point. I am certainly not coming from that position of growth is everything. This programme is about growth because the funding is about growth. But there are other things that are going on, and there are other forms of looking at things. And there's a massive pushback against financial growth alone. And I have to say, there's part of me that's really intrigued, and this is the kind of development part for me, is to explore how might we look at degrowth, about post-growth in business. Because we're also in a context now where we can't just continue on this level of growing and building and being extractive. There's lots of people that are thinking about this, including, the fantastic Donut Economics, where we're looking at the beyond and within the boundaries and overshoots in the kinds of work that we're doing or that is being done by others supposedly on our behalf. So I wanted to also bring this into the conversation. So this is John Fullerton from Capital Institute, who's looking at how we often spend a lot of our time with the most attention on products and services, where actually we're not looking at the kind of core of a regenerative approach to how we might be doing business and how we might be thinking about a more holistic, systemic way of things. If we thought about the way we work together in a more kind of connected, interdependent kind of way, that might really have a more hopeful kind of way of being together and of being able to prosper collectively. Let's take a little journey. In the work that you do, what if your business does really well? What if you've managed to sort of find a way of being able to balance what you're doing and you're starting to be able to build a buffer? There's some money that's spare that maybe buys you time or means you can do something with it. If you identify a real need that people have and that they'll pay you money for in a way that's comfortable, that feels right, you're happy to do it, they're happy to buy it, then what could you do with that money? Who could you bring along with you in the process of doing that business? What young people could you engage? What local suppliers might you bring in that would actually help you do it in a way that made you feel much more content, that made you feel like actually doing that business is producing something more value beyond you? Who could you buy your materials, or which freelancers could you bring in to come and work with you in that process of making what you do in your business? And where might you put the profits of that work? Where might you place them, and who might benefit from them?
We should be asking these questions to other forms of businesses. I think, like you were saying, most creatives are very values-driven, extremely principled and passionate about what they believe in. Mm-hmm. So
We're just doing a little experiment, though.
Oh, okay.
Hold one sec, and then we'll come back to that. Could you put money into your local school, your local elders group, community infrastructure, like your profits could put some equipment in a park? In the next generation, could you train up new people? In your local ecology, could you support a dinner for all the creatives in this room today? Thinking about your sector, could you promote something, create something new to happen, or put some money back into the sector that you're part of? Your staff, the people that work with you, could you do something more for them? Or even a national purpose? Let's come back to what you were asking.
So I was just saying that I think that most creatives actually think and feel along those lines, and that are actually extremely ethical and think about where they're putting their money, especially when they haven't got a huge amount of it.
Totally.
Are very, very clear about where their finances and what principles and businesses they support, and they will research and try and get the information to make as clear ethical choice as they can.
So I'm saying take it further.
Yeah.
So make the money so that you can do something with the money. So that you can actually take it to people, so you can actually have a bigger impact than just your work. And then collectively, we start to do, if everyone is doing a different version of this, what happens when collectively we are all building and adding to the world in which we're in? And what if you design your business to do more than that? So, for example, to take the profits, which is just one thing that you produce, and to do things with that, or to look at decision making, to share the decisions about your business so that other people might be involved in how you do what you do, or the ownership of it, that your business might be owned by your community or your community of practice, for example. Thinking about how, if we work together in this notion of being interdependent about what we do, that we might create collective services. So the kinds of problems that we have with like getting insurance or buying things when we're only buying one of them, if we were collectively doing some of this, what kind of power that might make for us all. And then how we might collaborate on work because we know and trust each other, because we've been able to see what each other does. And then again, the collective purchasing of resources, the amount of money we have to pay for a software package and how ridiculous that is on a monthly subscription, and how collectively buying things might be one way of doing it. And what I'd like to see is a growth, not just in terms of money, but a growth in terms of collaborations, about how we could create local wealth, how we could grow the opportunities for other people who are not in this room, and how we might grow our relationships. That's me. Thank you. Thanks. Are we doing questions? We've got time? Fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm going to pass this mic around for anyone who's in the room. If you're online, then drop your questions in the chat, and one of the team will ask the question for you. So let's get into it. This mic, you can't hear yourself, but they can hear you on stream, so try not to beatbox into it. Anyone?
This is sort of a hypothetical question, really, but when you're busy doing the bit that was at the beginning of your presentation, which is getting the work in, doing the work, and then getting paid for it, and that's all consuming of your time, how do you do the other stuff?
Are you asking me as a creative?
Yeah, well, I could ask the room, but you know that I feel like I agree with everything you're saying, but I feel like it's a question of resource and time, and everyone's already working hard, and it's thinking about how do you create that slack to do that more.
I guess you kind of get better over time, don't you? You get used to doing things earlier and that kind of thing. But I remember not having a social life for quite a while, you know, and just that thing of like everything sort of swallowing up all of my time, or I didn't quite do it as well as I wanted. It was kind of that as well. Yeah. Anyone got any good tips?
I've got a few tips. This kind of goes around in the story in a way, because in the 1990s, I ran a design and media company in London and New York and Tokyo, but they were just telephones in an office, really. And what happened there, the business started with just two of us sitting in a tiny little studio. And over the course of about 5 years, we grew to the point where we were almost a PLC. And we had a 2-year period where we were working in music and entertainment industry. Became enormously successful with jetting around on private jets, going everywhere, working with all these rock stars. It was all fantastic. And then the stress of all of that started to build up. And I found that I was spending more and more time talking to accountants and hardly any time creating anything. Mm-hmm. And really that disparity got beyond anything. Then we were actually employing people to get business in. And, so I had no contact with even the people, the business that was coming in at all. And eventually the whole thing exploded, as things often did in the 1990s. It was quite a volatile time in a way. And I ended up with nothing, sitting back in the garden with no reputation, no phones ringing, nothing at all. And in a way, what that did, it got me to recapitulate what was truly valuable about the process itself. And I found that going back to really just focusing on what I loved and then finding the people that I would really love to work with. And that process of having that intimacy of who do I actually really want to work with and who really turns me on. And then those are the people that I build a relationship with. And what it is, it takes away that arduousness of like, oh, I've got to go out. Because all you're really doing is you're building relationships. So you're not in that push and shove process all the time. So it does take focus and it does take time, which maybe obviously we haven't all got if we've got to keep the lights on and the doors open. But I feel that the key to everything, from what I've learned over many, many years and going up and down, it's all about building relationships. Great. And the more you focus on relationships and the quality of those relationships, the less you have to worry about things coming in the door. And the more you get to concentrate on more of what you love.
Fabulous, thank you.
And the relationship with yourself. Mm-hmm. That I think needs so much attention and care and love and respect and value is how we treat ourselves in this process. Fabulous. It is such a creative process to learn, to honor, value, and appreciate the life force that's coming through us that we are sharing and shining into the world.
Thank you. We got any online questions?
Do you want to read the comment?
So it was from earlier on in the talk, but Inven just said yes to homes, yes to pensions, and yes to security.
Right. Thank you.
Any more questions from the room? No? No one? I'll ask a question, if I could.
Please do.
I mean, in your conversations with loads of different freelancers and creatives, like, what would you say is the main barrier to someone finding their value that isn't like lack of confidence or inexperience or structural?
I think it is those things. I think if you've the structural stuff will hold you back anyway. It will make you not value yourself in the first place or value what you do. So that also needs dealing with. The stuff around confidence is key, because it's like putting something out into the world is a really brave thing. Yeah. And to say, I think this is good enough, is a really, really confident-driven thing. And you can do it when you see other people doing it. So I suppose maybe exposure to other people doing it. That's why creatives should go into schools and show people that you can have a career and you can do these things. Because if you don't know that someone can do this stuff, you know, that someone can make a ball with sound speakers like that, or can't remember what this thing is, like, yeah, parrot thing, this parrot thing, and put some electronics in and make it do, you know, trigger stuff to happen digitally. If you don't know that stuff, you don't get to be a designer or a maker or a thinker. And one of the problems is, from my perspective as a designer, it's dominated by, you know, too many of the same type of people designing things, and not enough people who are on the receiving end of processes, systems, experiences and products, being able to design things from scratch. So that one of the projects I'm working on is connecting through culture as we age with Bristol University, and it's elder people designing products and cultural services for elder people. And they're all going, well, I don't really know much about technology, but that's not the point. They understand deeply what is needed and what they might be excited by. And they're the perfect people to be designing stuff. But if they don't even get a look in, they don't even get a chance to know that these things, you know, this kit exists, they don't even get a chance to be able to think that they might try it and then get confident.
Sure.
Schools, by the way.
Yeah.
So few designers and creatives actually. So few designers and creatives and artists are invited into schools. You know, it's
And
shocking.
Care,
It's
and care
absolutely
homes
shocking.
and community
Yeah.
centres and
Shocking.
places where real people are that don't get
It's like
told.
we're on always on the periphery, and it's like I noticed with our daughter's school, for example. I mean, it's a great school, and I went to something last night which is enormously creative, absolutely amazing, incredible creativity. Yet when you go to any of the meetings or anything, it's always like maths, science. It's always, you know, it's always academic results that get all of the cream, and the creativity is sort of slightly. But like you said, you know, the Squid Game, 900 million. I mean, we could name loads of them. You know,
Absolutely.
Minecraft, anything. You know, that's worth billions. You know, so very underrated as a.
Totally. Any other questions or thoughts? What does it make you think about?
Maybe it is about those cross-media, multimedia spaces where we even have a chance and an opportunity, like the studio's opened. And we came to your open day, me and my daughter, on Saturday, because it was specifically invited for 15 or 18-year-olds. And so I came with her. And I think it's remarkable that you've opened, Pervasive Studios have opened yourselves on a Friday.
This is a special
and
place.
Invite people in. And it's so refreshing and so and could be a real catalyst. Because actually it is about conversation. It is about exchanging information, about sharing networks, sharing ideas, encouraging, saying, yeah, I know you're feeling that.
Well,
I felt that too.
Maybe
You know, and
there's
I
a couple
got
of people.
through it.
There's a couple of residents here. I don't know if you'd like to maybe say what it's like to be near other people. I know you've only just started, so it's not fair for me to. Could you?
Yeah, me. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Okay. So yeah, it's really good because there are so many people working around similar technologies or similar processes, but all from slightly different angles. So I feel like it's just a very collaborative place because we all have very similar interests, I feel, and everyone has like a different piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And so it feels very uncompetitive and like we could just all continually learn from each other. Like I've learned from lots of people here in the stream already, and you, Jill, obviously loads. So yeah, that's kind of what I think.
Works, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's why you should listen to the Roots.
just like, off that topic, but I just wanted to say I thought it was really interesting about the idea of that actually, if you undervalue yourself, you're actually making it a more difficult space for people to come into that maybe they won't be able to afford if that becomes the norm. And I think that's really, something that's really useful, and especially when you're like emerging. I think I was really shocked by those 3 parts, because like I'm a writer, and then I find that like I write 1 day a week, which is today, which is amazing that Pervasive Media Studio does this. And I just find so much that throughout the week my to-do list becomes the 2 other sides of it, of being paid or getting the work in,
Right.
rather than just like doing the work. And I think that time for like play and stuff is really important. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, I guess a question could be like, because obviously there's quite a lot of talking about businesses, but is there any part of like, is there any kind of important business tips that you think can work for like an individual creative that's almost trying to like build a business out of themselves?
I think it comes back to being confident. So be confident in what your product is, what you do. Talk to everybody, be around, but also make sure that your business is expressing you and your values. So that, for example, one of the things people are increasingly doing is they're locking the company to a purpose. So, for example, if your business was around your writing, but also bringing on young writers, you might put that as part of how you describe what you do. Then that makes me, as someone who's looking for someone to write, go, oh, you're more interesting than just someone who wants to write. You're someone with some like business depth to you that I think suddenly makes you much more appealing and interesting, because you're not only doing the writing, but you're doing the business of being a writer in a values-driven way with a purpose.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you.
Cool.
I think that's actually all we've got time for, so I'm going to have to take the beatbox mic away. So thanks everyone for coming, and thanks if you joined us online as well. If you want to stick around the hot desk, you're welcome to. Come and find a member of the studio team if you need anything. Studio people, put your hands up. Sorry, Vic. What else do I need to say? It's my first time doing this. If you're watching on... if you're watching online, drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk if you need anything. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers. Brilliant.